This video is going to cover how to deploy a Docker container on an Ubuntu VM that will allow us to RDP from my local MacBook. Containers are very flexible, and I learned this as I was investigating vulnerable apps by OWASP, the wrong secrets, and I started to reverse engineer, and I'm still working through how to deploy this vulnerable app. But one of the things that they do is have a container that you can use RDP. So this video is going to cover that. So a little prerequisite here, under my repo, build beginner ethical hacking environment, there is a separate folder here that deploys a base VM. So I have a separate video that's in the documentation under the README that deploys a local VM. So assuming that you have walked through this, if not, walk through that video. But this is going to go through and deploy this Docker file. We're going to build one local. But assumptions here is you have a Windows or a MacBook with VMware Fusion or Hyper-V installed and configured, and using the Vagrant providers to deploy the machine. So after the machine is deployed, we're going to SSH to the machine. So I have that here. So let's pull this up, and I have ran the sudo docker images just to show you that this VM I use for ethical hacking purposes for a variety of learning and whatnot. I also have AI local here, but I want to deploy a container that's going to be on this VM. So if you look under VMware Fusion, so under here, I have a couple VMs. I have a Kali VM, and I have the virtual machine that I'm SSH right here. So there's the VM. Here's an SSH session from my local MacBook. So let's go ahead and go local on my machine here to build that. So I'm going to pull down this repo onto this machine. So let's go to code. And I haven't pulled it down, so we'll do get clone. We'll pull this down. So this will pull down to my local machine here, and we'll go into the files. We'll go into our desktop. So there's a couple commands that the Docker file will build an image local. So we're going to do sudo docker build. We're going to tag it with our basic desktop. And so what it'll do is because it assumes that the Docker file, it will automatically, and it finds, when you run the build command, it finds the Docker file name, and then it goes through and processes everything. So right now, real time, it's pulling down the Docker image. So in the Docker file here, so let's come over here. So it's pulling down this image here. We're adding a local user, and we're adding get. So if I decide to add something within the container, I can use get most of the time, and then it's going to copy a startup file. So this startup file idea came from the wrong secrets, so a big shout out to them. It's a very powerful solution here, there's a lot more than my basic video. But let's go back to thing here. So it's still unpacking. So these are about 250 meg. It uses the default. Our desktop uses an image which I learned through the so let's go over here to the Linux location where this image is at, and it's on linuxserver.io, and there's a bunch of images out here. I happen to be using our desktop one. In previous career, I did a lot of Microsoft deployment, so it was kind of handy, and when I saw that was just neat to be able to have a UI within a running container. I do have other individuals I've talked to in the business where they'll build themselves a container with a set of tools, and regardless if they're on a personal machine or a work machine, they'll have that same container available. So once the container's built, then what we'll do is we'll start up the container on the Ubuntu server, and then we will RDP to it and show you that. So this is one idea. I thought this was pretty cool to have a virtual machine running a container that you RDP into. So kind of a few different levels of virtualization. Containerization is a very flexible deployment method. This isn't something that you would do in a production environment, but it's definitely for useful. And sometimes, in my case, I have several years experience but never seen it. And when I saw that capability where they can, when you're taking a class and you're using the OWASP wrong secrets VM, you can do that. So let's go back to so the image is built. So let's go ahead and run the VM. So we'll run -port or -p 3389, and we'll do basic. Before I do that, so let's do sudo docker images. Notice there's a new image called basic desktop here. It was just created. So let's go ahead and I'm going to SSH into this again from just showing you what's happening here. So let's SSH 52 pickup at 172.16.133.184. If I can type my password correctly. So I'm going to show you after I start this. So let's do sudo docker run -port 3389, and then basic desktop. You could deploy this in the background, but I like to just show you that it's running here. Let's hop over here and type in netstat-ant, and I want to show you the 3389 listener. So right here it's listening on all things. So the last step here is, now that the image is local to that Ubuntu server, I have a application here that is in the Apple Store called Windows App. It's our desktop, but I'm going to do PC Quick Connect, and it's going to prompt me for credentials, and there's a certificate here that it doesn't trust. But the idea here is I am inside of the VM, or inside of the container. So I have a VM running a container inside of Docker that I'm RDP'd from my MacBook. So if I come in here and type in ifconfig, it does show you that you're running, and this is just knowing Docker. This is the IP address, but you have internet access from there. You can type in df, so you're inside of the container. So there's different ways to do it, but there's 14 of the 30 gig of the containers used. So you could use Git to deploy other things or pull stuff down from GitHub or GitLab or wherever you have your source code, and you could build yourself out a machine. If you click on applications, there's Firefox. There's a lot you can do in here, but it's just, this video is just to show you that you have the ability to use a UI within a container to build you something out. That's one of the powerful things about containers, is once you get it working on one machine, you can go to, so I can deploy this on my Windows machine in my home lab and use the same set of tools without having to recreate it. And that's probably what will happen. But for this video, I just wanted to show you that this is capable. So if you have any questions, put them down in the comments on YouTube, and I hope you found this useful.